Welcome to this everyday resilient legend, the beautiful wild woman, Kate Rydge, who is here today to share her story about living primitively and also how to integrate after transformation. Now, Kate is the co-founder of Nature Philosophy, and they specialise in facilitating transformational earth-based programs. And they offer programs for adults, families, women's programs, and they're all online as well as in person. So they're an amazing program, and I can absolutely vouch for that. Kate is also the mother of two beautiful souls who I adore. And Kate has lived primitively for a year in the Pine Barrens in the USA, and is also trained in a wild earth tantra, which is very exciting. Now, Kate, I absolutely love the idea of heading out into nature-based programs, because we know that resilience is all about developing our relationships with ourselves, with others, but also the world around us and the natural world. And what's really sort of missing, and what we know now about depression and a lot of other mental health related issues, is that it comes from being disconnected. And so we know that reconnection is such a great tool for, getting to know ourselves and becoming more resilient. So we would love to hear your story today about, your journey of living primitively, but also how you integrated back into society after having some huge transformational shifts in your journey.
Absolutely. Well, welcome everyone who's listening. Thanks for joining us today as well. It's such a big story, really, and it's probably started years ago with my own personal disconnection. I grew up very much, I spent a lot of time in the bush as a kid, there's no doubt, but I was definitely also, as a teenager and a young woman, disconnected from a real sense of my personal power, a sense of my life purpose and what it all meant and where I belonged, and definitely needed to get a very long way away from my family in order to actually discover who I really was and what I was really here in the world to do. And there was just something also like a real longing inside of me to do that, but to do it in a nature connection setting. And so I was really, really fortunate, because by the time I was in my early 20s, I'd come across meditation, I'd come across Reiki, I'd come across Indigenous philosophy, and it started to spark something inside of me that did speak to resilience, and not only individuals being resilient, but also cultural resilience. And then I ended up over in America, of all things, at a nature connection school run by a guy called Tom Brown Jr., who studied as a child for many years with a Southern Lip and Apache called Stalking Wolf. And Stalking Wolf taught him a whole range of survival skills and philosophies, and a whole lot of things that any human could use to really come back home to their birthright connection to nature. And in that, I also did a year with his school in the Pine Barrens in New Jersey, which is like 1 million acres of beautiful wilderness in the middle of New Jersey, of all places. It's probably the lungs that keep that whole state alive, I'd say. And I just had such great fortune to live in a primitive shelter, a dug-in shelter in the ground, and to do 4 seasons there, going through what I would basically have to say was a complete life-changing, transformational experience, kind of like a year-long vision quest. It was a lot of solitude, a lot of deep immersion experiences into nature, a lot of vision quest, and a lot of basically feeling like my personality that I brought into that experience was getting broken down. And so it was huge, and it was hard as well. It was really hard. It was very challenging, mentally challenging and emotionally challenging, and I had to just, in some respects, I had to just survive it. I'd never seen snow before in my entire life until it snowed, because I'm an Aussie girl,
Yeah.
And it's got down to minus 16 degrees in winter and was snowing and all those sorts of things. So there was a lot of mental hardship. There really was. And I was actually quite grateful when it was over and the pressure of that was over, and the solitude of that experience as well. was over and I could come home to Australia and start to do what you're talking about, Casey, is integrating what was a very, very big personal experience. And to be honest, it changed my life forever. So in some ways, I feel like I wasn't the same, but I didn't know how I was different. And it took many years to work out who I was now and how I needed to be in the world for that to have a rightness. And luckily for me, meeting my partner and starting a business with my partner Sam and offering nature philosophy programs was at the heart of finding that rightness. So for me, it was a lot about finding a purpose beyond self and then making a commitment to live from that place of soul level, body-based rightness as my true guide in life, rather than slipping back into what the external culture said I should be doing. And that external authority, which is probably really what was creating my disconnect and challenges in the first place, particularly as a teenager. So,
Absolutely, Kate. And I love what you just said there about the environment, because we know that, you know, it is the environment that really is can help us to flourish, but it can also put us back on that path where we were. And you know, when we go away and we do these transformational programs, and I know a lot of our listeners would, you know, we go and we do these brilliant programs, and they're brilliant at the time, and they're really transformative, but then stepping back from the program into the same context, into the same environment at home, surrounded by the same people who haven't had the same experience as you, who don't know the changes that have gone on, you know. And so the really challenging part, and this is where real resilience comes in, is how do we integrate, you know, once we step back into that environment. So would you be able to share with us some of the strategies that you use to help you integrate after transformation?
Yeah, for sure. And you're right. It's where the rubber meets the road. That's the sharp edge of transformation is actually landing it in our day-to-day life. And I think a lot of people find that very challenging. And I think in some ways it's a bit of a, you know, you want to be able to, first of all, be realistic. So that very much has helped me. And this is advice we offer other people through our programs as well, is to be realistic with yourself. You know, not to try to put a lot of pressure and expectations on how you think you should look after going into some sort of a transformational program, but instead trusting that when there's a sense of maybe you know, an uncomfortableness in the space where you used to fit but now you feel that you don't, that'll be shown to you. And then the reality of it is, though, that we also need to be self-aware enough to be prepared to say, oh, this is where I'm being asked to make a change. And you know, that it's kind of like, well, why are we doing all these programs? We're doing them because we want life to look different. And who is the one that stops that from really happening? At the end of the day, it's going to be us. And so it's pointy. It's very pointy, and it sort of invites us, I think, to take more responsibility for ourselves and our own self-care integration. So I think it's kind of a mixed bag for me, integration. I think there's a sense of just being really easy on yourself and realistic and not putting crazy pressures on yourself, where often we're going to go and do a program because there's a part of our life that we've felt stuck in and we know we need it to change. And so the program will be the trigger for that. But the real work is in landing it in our own life. And the medicine of that is that often it's in the simple things. That's one thing I would say too, is that, you know, not to have these grandiose ideas of suddenly how dramatic life is going to be, but actually changing the small things and making it a step-by-step process. I've also just really found communicating to the people that you live with what's happening for you is critical. Often we can get so caught up in feeling like we're misunderstood, feeling like the people who are in our life don't know us and don't care about us enough to really see what's happening, but we forget the critical element of speaking our truth And so I think there's a real sense there for me over the years for myself, and I've seen this in so many others as well, learning how to activate your voice, learning how to speak your truth and take responsibility for changing your own life, but letting other people know that that's what you're wanting to do because that's what you need. And that can be very powerful as well. And sometimes people that we think are the enemy suddenly start to become allies. So that's just,
I love that so much, Kate, because we can have these, these really big shifts when we're out having these amazing transformational programs. And then we just expect the other people to know that it's happened, And so without really being clear and talking about potential boundaries or maybe some of the struggles that you're going through as you integrate, or what your needs are, like how they can best support you as you go through that transformation, is such a critical element that we forget to explicitly say, hey, can you help me out here? I'm going through this, or this is how, things has changed for me. I love that so much.
Totally. And sometimes some people say they need more space and other people need more connection. There's no right or wrong. Just who are you? What do you need uniquely? And honouring yourself and giving yourself permission to create that for yourself can be powerful as well.
Yeah, that's amazing, Kate. I love that advice. And have you got any other sort of practical type coping skills? I know talking is a practical skill, but something for more the individual around helping to shift through something, that idea of stepping back into an environment that you're now different in.
Yeah, I mean, there's many things really, but I think body movement, if you're having trouble and you're getting triggered and you're starting to have people or events in the external environment start to trigger those places of uncomfortableness within you, I think, basically first step for me is always putting some music on that represents how you feel, or just getting outside into nature and moving your body, and in a sense taking responsibility first for moving it through your own system before making it about anybody else. I also, though, if I've come back from a big program and have had a big transformational wave happen, we do more work. So I'll do a breath session with somebody, or I'll have a session with someone and do some dream analysis or some voice dialogue, or, I'm not into talk therapy. I don't really like talk therapy, but things that are actually activating my own movement of understanding what it is that I'm getting caught on after the event as I'm integrating. It's all a work in progress. So anything specific like that anyone can hold on to that actually helps them create movement and continue the process of transformation. We kind of think, it's all about the program itself that we're going to, and that's where we do all the work. But it's an ongoing process, and we have to continue to ride the waves. And specific techniques can be very, very powerful. Sometimes just meditation, or doing a sit spot in nature, or getting out into the ocean and walking barefoot. It doesn't need to be complex. But if we're having a lot of emotional chaos and there's a lot of emotional movement, then that's an invitation, I think, from anyone's body to actually move that through so that you can release it. And so not shying away from really feeling into emotions. I know that's hard for a lot of us because we don't like feeling uncomfortable emotions, but the more we build the capacity to learn how to do that, the greater easefulness we have with leaning into challenging emotions and then moving through the heart of it down into what's really underneath, and then allowing ourselves to really authentically feel how we feel. And that's a very powerful thing. It's a very powerful thing to do.
So powerful, Kate. And I think you've hit the nail on the head there. And it's such a critical point is, when we don't want to feel those emotions and what's actually going on, what happens is it gets suppressed within our body, and we know that suppression is what leads to depression. And so it's such a critical element, you know, and if we keep pushing it down, it will eventually bubble up in some way, whether it comes out as anger or depression, or there'll be some kind of other response. And so we know that moving and shifting it through our body helps us to not only feel it, but then release it, so that that energy doesn't get stuck within our bodies. And we know when that, you know, that negative energy gets stuck, it can lead to other, you know, physical ailments or diseases, and it shows up in other ways too. So I think that is such a critical element about, you know, body movement and moving the emotions through us. I love that so much. And the other thing that I absolutely love, and this has really helped me that you spoke about, is the holotropic breath work. Whenever I get back and I'm feeling, you know, there's a lot of turmoil going on, and this is at any time, but breath work, it's so simple and it's very transformational in itself. So that's a great tip. Now, Kate, if somebody is in a similar situation as you, where they've gone from potentially a really different contrast in life and stepped into, you know, back into a different world, or they've gone through a transformative experience and then they're shifting and integrating into their home life, what would be the advice that you would give them?
Well, probably just to be compassionate with yourself, you know, and open and curious. Don't necessarily know, you know, leaving a program, you don't know yet what's going to happen and how the work you've done in that program is going to change the life that you're living. And sometimes it can take a couple of months for transformation and for the effective work in programs to take hold. So just compassionate care, staying open and curious, and I think more than anything, to cultivate this type of awareness we're talking about, where we don't just say, well, that was in the program and now that was done. I released something there and now there's nothing else I need to do about it, because I've never experienced that to be true. And I know so many other women that I've worked with, and men as well, who are so surprised sometimes when they've done so much work on a part of themselves, but it just keeps on coming back and cycling back through their life. And to maybe just be realistic in that it takes many, many years to truly unwind ourselves from childhood wounding, traumatic events in life. It's absolutely possible though, but we have to actively work at it. So just to be realistic as well, and to care for yourself in whatever might be coming up. You know, there is no real faulty human. That's our own darkness. That's our own shadow coming up to say, oh, I'm feeling this thing and that means that I'm terrible, or it means that I'm a piece of shit. You know, people really turn against themselves quite dramatically, but the truth is actually that there's no fault in being who you are, and that all parts of who you are meant to be there, and they're there for you to learn how to harness, to transform into personal power. And so just to remember that in the overarching journey that you're on right now, that there's a rightness to it. And so much of it is about learning with grace to accept the rightness of all of what has happened to us in life, all of what we're having to cope with in life. And if we can learn enough mastery of the journey of being human, we can learn to transform anything that is into more and more personal power, and continue just to explore our potential as a human. So just, you know, this overarching philosophies like that I've found to be very, very helpful as well. So.
Oh, thank you. That is absolutely beautiful advice. I think, you know, sometimes we can be our own best friend, but we can also be our own worst enemy, you know, and so, yeah, acknowledging that. I think that's beautiful, all parts of us. And we're not broken and there's not something wrong with us. We're just beautiful human beings that we need to just figure out what our needs are and how we can meet them. And so I love that so much. Kate, thank you so much for your time, your wisdom, and your beautiful energy today. It is so much appreciated, and I know I've got a lot out of your session. I'm sure everybody else has. Now, how can people get in touch with you, Kate?
Well, you can have a look at our website, I guess. So naturephilosophy.com.au, and I do have a couple of online programs coming up at the end of this year and programs for next year. And just have a look at what we're offering. Welcome to send an email to say hi as well at kate@naturephilosophy.com.au. And just reach out and get in touch.
Great. Thank you so much. How amazing was the beautiful wild woman, Kate Rydge, with some amazing transformative advice. Now, just remember, when I'm talking about coping skills, I may say things like chunk it, map it, flip it, block it. And when I'm talking about it, I'm referring to the problem or the problem that you may have. Now, remember that these coping skills are transferable across the board. Now, that means that they're transferable across situations, context, other people, environments. It's amazing. So, great toolbox to learn. So, to summarize the top 3 coping skills for integrating your transformation, you can focus on number 1, love it. And in this case, us as the individual can be the problem, and that can sometimes get in the way of integrating successfully. So, being realistic, easy on yourself, and cultivating self-love. You really want to love up on yourself. Try not to put pressure on yourself or any sort of should expectations about how you think you should be or look in that situation. Remember, it's just the little 1% things and the step-by-step processes that will help you along the way, rather than having these big grandiose ideas about your big transformation. Remember, just be compassionate, open, and curious with yourself. Number 2 is talk it. Now, talk it is all about communicating with the people that you live with and the people that you love about what's going on for you, and the changes that that have occurred for you and the transformation that's going on. So it's all about you taking responsibility and talking through the changes that are occurring in our lives by communicating your needs to your loved ones. You really want to activate your voice and speak your truth. Now, a part of talk therapy is also talk it is also a part of talk therapy, and that's kind of a mode of healing that supports you by talk therapy, meaning psychologists and counselors working with professionals in that way. But I do want to highlight that there are so many other coping skills or coping tools that are different to talk therapy. It's not the only way. And tools like being tools, and I'll talk about those a little bit later. Now, number 3 is move it. Now, move it is a coping skill that is really, really critical for moving stuck emotions. And by practicing skills like I spoke about, like the tools that I just spoke about, like dream analysis, voice dialogue, meditation, sit spots, spending time in nature, all of those different things are just essential. Now, if you've enjoyed this episode of Everyday Resilient Legends and got lots out of it, please share it with your loved ones and let's get this information out there. Now, if you know any other everyday resilient legends that could be interviewed in this series by me, please just reach out to me at mental.health.hacker on Facebook or on Instagram. I'm Dr. Casey Delmara, your high vibe coach, and until next time, you've got this. I believe in you.